Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Place and Resources Overview Committee. It's 10 o'clock, we're starting. Can I just remind people to use the microphones, please, when they speak? The system here only allows for one red light to show at a time, and so until your red light goes on, you won't be heard, and neither will you be seen on the large screen. And also, perhaps when you do speak, if you could please just say who you are, mainly for our audience at home, including officers. So we'll move on. Item number 1, apologies for absence. See, I forgot to turn my red light off then, I'm sorry. Thank you. Item number 2, any declarations of interest? I hear none. Item number 3, Chairman's update. Actually, what I'd just like to say is I would just like to pay tribute to our European friends in Ukraine for their extreme bravery, and we wish them well. And I also wanted to pay tribute to the number of amazing people throughout Dorset who have been collecting, donating, sending. Certainly in Stonminster Newton, we packed just under 6,000 boxes last week, and I've never known a week like it. It was actually very emotional. So that's really all I wanted to say under Chairman's update. Thank you. Item number 4, public participation. We don't have any questions. Item number 5, questions from members. We have none. So we move on to the main body of today's meeting. Item number 6, our consultation report for the Antisocial Behaviour related public spaces protection orders. The way we're going to do this is that John Newcombe will be presenting this and he will run everything through, and then we're going to take each order one by one. So perhaps if you have any questions relating to the actual order, leave it till we get to that point, but if they're general, just go for it. So I'll pass over to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Public Spaces Protection Orders, PSPOs, introduced by the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014. We have a number already in existence, Chair. We have the West Dorset District PSPOs and the Weymouth and Portland PSPOs. We recently extended both, so they both expire in August, and during the past 12 months, we conducted a full and thorough review of all of our PSPO provisions, and hence a public consultation, and the results are before committee for consideration today, Chair. I think the first thing to sort of mention here is these are a statutory provision, which is set out in statute, primary legislation with regulations as well, and in order to approve and implement a PSPO, there are a number of legal tests which need to be satisfied. Now, those tests are laid out in section 10.2 of the report, Chair. Is the behaviour likely to have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality? Is it likely to be persistent or continuing in nature? Is it likely to be unreasonable? And does the behaviour justify the restrictions imposed? Now, the way we're looking to approach this, as you've quite rightly pointed out, Chair, is to look at each of the orders, to consider whether these tests are met, and then to either approve or not approve each part of the orders. But what I'd like to do, Chair, just in the interim, is just to give a brief update on what's happened since the consultation. So we had a really good response. We ran it for 9 weeks, circa 250 responses, all set out in the consultation paperwork, which is attached as appendices. Happy to answer any questions relating to that, as you've pointed out when we look at each of the orders. But I thought it might be quite helpful just to summarise the main changes that we've made as a result of the consultation. So the first one is the implementation date, which is quite obviously changed slightly for the West Dorset order because we've extended it, and we've had to push this back slightly. So this is due to go to Cabinet on the 5th of April. Then there's a 6-week cooling off period, and then the implementation of the PSPOs ready in time for summer. that's the first major change. The second change is some concerns were raised in relation to the dispersal powers, the powers officers will be given to ask people to leave. Now, what we've done is we've listened to those concerns and we've linked that into the behaviour. So we've listed the types of behaviour that would potentially be covered by the order. We've also linked in the request to leave a specific area to a previous warning that's been given about that behaviour. So it can't sort of come out of the blue, as it were. We've also limited the number of staff that will be authorised to issue fixed penalty notices under the provisions to police officers and duly authorised officers. Now, that could be Dorset Council officers, Town Council officers, National Trust officers, etc. But what I would just like to say, Chair, is whoever is authorised will go through a robust training programme and will not be issuing fixed penalty notices other than in a last resort. So as I've just mentioned, so we have listed some types of antisocial behaviour. We haven't put those specific behaviours within each order for obvious reasons that anyone who would like to circumvent the rules will just find a different type of antisocial behaviour and to try and get round those. But there are some examples there which we thought would be helpful, Chair. We've also included the evidence, which was part of the previous report, which came to Place and Resources prior to the consultation. That's been included within this report as well as the equalities impact assessment. And then a couple of the other sort of changes which were raised as part of the consultation, in particular from Liberty, was in relation to the potential effect on gypsies and travellers, which we've identified as not affecting those because it doesn't cover vehicles in relation to the camping on beaches provisions. And then also in relation to overnight camping and members of the public who are using shelters during the day for their children for sunshade, etc. So we've amended the camping provisions as well. So they're the main changes that have taken place. I think probably it's a good point just to talk about all of the additional areas that have been proposed. So when we did the review, we looked at the evidence of antisocial behaviour, and that's all included within the appendix. As a part of the consultation, we've had a huge number of additional areas proposed. Now, the way to introduce PSPOs is to gather the evidence, to propose an area and an activity, and then to consult. So the plan is, Chair, that we will discuss these proposed provisions at this point in time, and then all of the additional areas that have been put forward, we'll look at those. So we'll go away, we'll have a look at our evidence base, we'll discuss with the police, the relevant town council, and then we'll look. If the evidence supports that a PSPO should be introduced, then we'll do that. We'll draft it up, we'll put it out to consultation, and we'll get people's views on that. It would be quite improper for us just to add additional areas in at this point, hence this is the way we're looking to do it. So yes, Chair, I think really the thing I'd like to add is these are not new. So these have been in since 2018. They've been extended for 12 months and then for another 4 months for the West Dorset provisions. We've looked at the existing provisions. They work. They are enforced within the best of our abilities with the resources available, and we do work with all of our partners to make sure that we're not overreacting, shall we say. Yeah, and then, so really, it's shall I pause there or shall I run through the orders?
No. Does anybody have any questions on the generals? Councillor Coombs. Oh.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Yeah, it was just really trying to understand a little bit more because I don't recall my area. Sorry, I'm Councillor Tony Coombs from Verwood. I don't recall us being included in the consultation for the PSPOs. I've just had a quick look back on my system, and the only consultation I had was for the previous dog orders back in 2021. We do have an antisocial behaviour issue at the moment, so perhaps outside of this meeting, I'd like to have a further discussion with officers about how we can move it forward rather than take up time this morning.
Thank you. I think that's quite right. So, John, that could be taken into account with the extra areas that have been suggested through the consultation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course. So we did consult with all of the town councils. We also consulted with all members. We sent out newsletters. We did quite a lot of advertising for the consultation within existing communication channels. So apologies that you hadn't seen that. I don't know quite what's happened there. But of course, yeah, we're happy to have a sit down, have a look at the stats, have a look at the issues. I know that we are working on some antisocial behaviour initiatives in your area at the moment, so I'm happy to take that forward, Chair, no problem.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, then, can I just have assurance that when you come to consider the additional areas that have been suggested, early on you will involve the ward members in that discussion to bring their local information, their local knowledge to bear? Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, John?
Just to say yes, of course, no problem.
That's good. Councillor Ho.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just on the additional points, I know you said today is not the time to make the amendments, but the additional points raised by the consultation process, is that now going to be an ongoing piece of work for this committee to review and make formal recommendations at a later time then? I don't want to get into the detail of the specifics, but I know Weymouth Town Council did ask for inclusion of quite a few areas that are in amongst the areas currently. And, you know, I know sort of fellow members down there were quite disappointed that they couldn't be taken forward at this stage, because what we feel is it may just move the issue on. And we're literally talking some instances 5 metres, 6 metres, because of the gaps within the existing orders. So I just really want to have an understanding about how the suggestions through the consultation process will make its way back to this committee and into the orders.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. John, did you want to come back on that?
Certainly, Chair. I think we've had about 35 additional areas proposed, all across the council area. What we have to do is we have to go away and we have to look at our data. So we've got access to police systems in community safety. We've got our own complaints database as well. What we will do is we'll have a look at the supporting evidence, and then we'll go back, speak to the town council again, ask for any additional supporting evidence, and then propose new additional areas for consultation. What I'm concerned about, Chair, is if we say we're going to bring in a PSPO for a specific area, and we have our consultation, and then we come up with a brand new area, it just circumvents the process. So I'm not saying we're going to take our time, but we'll make sure we do it properly. So we'll make sure that we achieve the objectives with the necessary data. Chair.
Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Starr, Upton and Litchett. I'd just like to make an observation, really. Reading the report, there seems to be lots of sort of grey areas that need careful interpretation. I'm reassured to hear that common sense will prevail. Things like single tent, fine, 2 tents, not. How far away is a second tent to be considered, etc. And certainly begging, at what point is it considered to be unacceptable? And I think all this area obviously demands a certain amount of common sense and understanding of people's predicament. But I'm reassured to hear you say that should be the case. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to ask any questions or speak on this before we move on to each order? Okay, we're moving on. Right, the first one we have is the Bridgeport Antisocial Behaviour Related PSPO, and within that there are just two areas, which is alcohol and antisocial behaviour. Does anybody, actually, John, did you want to talk to this at all, or shall we just see if there's any questions on it? Because I think everybody will have read all 314 pages. I do.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if I just outline. So this is an existing provision. It comes from the old West Dorset, the previous West Dorset District Council PSPO. What we've done is we've amended it slightly. There have been some additional areas which were proposed on the basis of evidence which we'd collated, and also feedback from Bridgeport Town Council. So in effect, it's the same order with a couple of extra areas and an additional provision to ask people who are causing problems, causing issues, and have already previously been warned about their behaviour to leave a specific area. Looking at the feedback from the consultation, but nothing too contentious in there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody happy with that order before we move to the next one? Okay, we're moving. Actually, John, do we need to take a vote on each one or just round up at the end? Could you advise? So this is a recommendation to Cabinet. So, beg your pardon, I've lost my sheet here. So the recommendation is to send this through to Cabinet. We've got two recommendations: to consider the results and then to make any changes to the draft or recommend. So we're just going to recommend straight to Cabinet. Is everybody happy? Thank you. Right, the next item is the Dorchester Antisocial Behaviour Related PSPO, and that brings in alcohol, intentional feeding of girls, and antisocial behaviour. John, did you want to talk to this?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I may, the legal test which is set out in statute is whether the threshold is met, and in order for the committee to recommend to Cabinet approval of the orders, it's necessary to consider whether those thresholds have been met. So perhaps if the decision could be based along the lines of does the committee consider that those thresholds are met, and is the committee happy to recommend the order with amendments as necessary to Cabinet? Sorry, Chair. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Does anybody have any questions or queries on this particular order? Are you happy that we make the recommendation to Cabinet? Yep, thank you. We move to Lyme Regis, and that one brings in alcohol, girls, and antisocial behaviour. John?
Thank you, Chair. So, as with the previous order, the existing provisions are included and then amended to add on additional antisocial behaviour provisions. Now, the feedback from the consultation is slightly less strong in terms of the alcohol provision for Lyme Regis. There are a number of very nice areas for families to gather and have picnics, and I think that reading through the responses, there are some concerns that there will be an overzealous interpretation of the need to enforce these requirements. And I think what I'd like to reassure members is that we are not under any circumstances looking to enforce these provisions on well-behaved social gatherings. That's not what they're there for. So all of our officers that are going to be trained to issue fixed penalty notices will be entirely aware that a couple, a family, a group of friends having a bottle of wine in the park causing no problems are not necessary to target. These are, as I've said before, a tool in the toolbox that can be used where necessary. And I think if you look at the responses, you can see that that's generally what people are concerned about. So the feeding of gulls, which of course is quite scary. I know my kids have been scared by seagulls swooping down and stealing their chips at Lyme Regis, and antisocial behaviour. They are existing provisions that have been amended and reinforced. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any queries, questions on this one? Are we happy to make the recommendations through to Cabinet as is? Yep, thank you. We move on to Portland, and this one just contains alcohol and antisocial behaviour. John.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the strong feeling that came back from the consultation is that this is needed in other parts of Portland. That is reflected across the majority of the orders, actually, Chair. I can't think of one where we haven't had additional areas proposed. We have done some scanning and some analysis. There is quite a lot of data to support additional areas in Portland, and we will review that and we will bring that back to a later meeting. But in the meantime, based on these existing provisions as amended, then we're up in the 80% support, and I'm not proposing to make any amendments, Chair.
Thank you. Any queries, questions? Are you happy to support the recommendation through to Cabinet? Yes, lovely. Moving on to West Bay, and this one contains alcohol, gulls and antisocial behaviour again. John.
Thank you, Chair. Same situation with West Bay. Existing provisions, alcohol, feeding of gulls. We're adding in that additional power in relation to a previous warning for antisocial behaviour. 75% in support of alcohol, 85 in support of feeding gulls, and 87 in support of ASB provisions. Again, Chair, some additional areas proposed, which we will take away and have a look at.
Thank you. Any questions, queries on this one? Happy for it to go to recommendation to Cabinet? Thank you. Right, we're on to Weymouth now. Now, this one carries quite a few provisions. We have alcohol, gulls, aggressive begging, cycling on the promenade, the Trinity passageway, gating, and antisocial behaviour. So, John, did you want to talk to this one? And then I'm sure there'll be some questions here.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a little bit more complicated and potentially a little bit more contentious. The consumption of alcohol provisions already been enforced for a long time, and as you'll be aware, Chair, we have our CSAS patrol officers that work with the neighbourhood policing team to enforce these provisions. Obviously, at peak summer times, it can be quite difficult. It's a very popular area, but we do have our foot patrols that are out and about. We also have our summer demand ASB patrols, and so we do enforce these consumption of alcohol provisions. We still have ongoing issues with feeding of gulls, which is exactly the same as West Bay and Lyme Regis, Chair. And then we've got the additional provisions in relation to aggressive begging. I have included a appendix in relation to this provision, Chair, from the European Court of Human Rights, a recent ruling from Cornerstone Barristers, which is summarised. I think it's important that we don't penalise people simply for being poor and simply for being hungry and being on the streets. And we have a fantastic operation in place in Weymouth called Operation Luscombe, which is where we bring people in, we help them, we've got housing, we've got Lantern Trust, we've got Reach, we've got all of the partners working together to help people who are genuinely homeless to rehouse them. So we're not looking to punish people for begging. What we are looking to do is to strike a balance between acceptable behaviour and members of the public feeling scared to go out and walk in the streets of Weymouth. So we have included aggressive begging. It is in the existing order, but we've updated it slightly just to reflect that ruling from the court just so that we stay within the confines of legal advice. Shall I pause there, just if that's okay?
Councillor Rowe.
Yes, good morning. I think what I'm going to talk about is about the aggressive begging and cycling. With the aggressive begging, what we're looking here is to achieve behaviour change. And many councils have abandoned PSPOs for begging because they don't achieve behaviour change. And I just wonder why we're not learning from other councils. So I understand it was in the previous PSPO. So you must disagree with me and say that it does achieve behaviour change. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yeah, happy to answer that, Chair. It is a tricky one. We do get quite a lot of complaints about begging, particularly in Weymouth. We've also had some additional areas proposed, and we've talked to partners about this, in particular the clerk of Weymouth Town Council, who herself has been quite perturbed by some of this behaviour near their council offices. What we do is we engage with people and we talk to them. It's incredibly helpful to have something in the back pocket if you need it to deal with aggressive begging. We've not issued a fixed penalty notice, but it can be quite persuasive to an individual who's refusing to take advice, refusing to take help, refusing to engage with services or to take on board signposting, to actually have that ability to say, if you carry on with your antisocial behaviour, then we will look to issue you with a fixed penalty notice. And it really is a last resort, but it is very helpful to our officers to have that tool in their toolbox in case they need it.
Thank you. I suppose there must be a differentiation between begging and aggressive begging, but come back, Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, I'm reassured to hear that it's used as a last resort. I've just got one other question about how do you define how near a bank or an ATM cash point a beggar would be to be aggressive begging? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good question, and it's common sense, isn't it? And it's empathy. It's the ability to deal with people and to engage with them in a caring and respectful manner. And we've got 4 fantastic CSAS officers. They're absolutely brilliant. And what they'll do is they'll engage with nominals that are causing issues, and they'll work with the police, they'll work with partner agencies to try and help them, and that's always the preferred approach. If, however, things do get a little bit out of hand, and if someone refuses to adapt their behaviour and is clearly causing an issue, then we will intervene and we will ask them to move, cease and desist. These are complaint-led. We don't march around the town centre looking for people to upset. If we get a complaint, we don't. You know, we're community officers. We're out in the community trying to help. If someone calls in and complains that there's aggressive begging, then we'll go and engage, and we'll try and sort of negotiate a satisfactory outcome. And if we can't, then it's brilliant to have that tool just in case.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I can understand the spirit in the way the PSPOs are being brought forward. But I do need clarity on how near to a bank or a cash point would somebody need to be. Unwittingly, they could then fall into being an aggressive beggar if they're too near a bank or a cash point.
Are we saying that to be aggressive, you'd have to, I mean, could somebody not display aggressive behaviour but happen to be near an ATM? Would that be classified as aggressive begging?
No, Chair. So it would be it's an evidence-based approach, isn't it? So if somebody's quite obviously sitting right next to an ATM and they're asking people for money in an aggressive manner, then we would look to intervene. If they just happen to be sitting nearby, you know, drinking a cup of coffee or have a blanket over their legs, etc., but they're not actually causing any problems, we haven't had any complaints, then we wouldn't seek to take action just because they were nearby.
Dorset West, as a former police officer as well, who's worked with these. These orders are very good. It's effectively having a toolkit that you can use for the situation. I think the question you raise is a very valid one, but I think with time, with the experience of the staff working with them, if you went to a cash point or an ATM and you felt intimidated by the behaviour of somebody so close that you couldn't get your money out or you felt it was going to be taken, that was where it would come in. If they're just sitting there, then no action will be taken. If the behaviour is also a factor in that. So you've got two things in this, and I think it would be obvious to people if there was a problem, so the staff could deal with it on that occasion.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to the cycling now?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So the cycling, I don't know if it's because of the way the questions were put forward, Chair, or whether it's such an emotive issue, but we had a real mixed response to the cycling provisions. Now, these are existing provisions that have already been enforced. It was a previous bylaw which was transferred over in 2018 as part of the PSPO review back then. We have enforced it. We have had circumstances where people have been cycling recklessly when the affected area has been incredibly busy with parents and small toddlers. So we have had cause to speak to people about this. We haven't issued any fixed penalty notices, but again, it is a tool that's available as a last resort. Looking at the responses, they sort of fall into two camps. The people that are not supportive of the provisions, and sort of camp A is that we need to put some cycle lanes in. Why haven't we got proper cycle lanes? It doesn't make any sense. And then camp B is, well, all cycling should be banned, full stop, all the time. Why are you just picking these dates? So I'm generalising, but I have read through them all, obviously, as you'll be aware, Chair. It is a decision that is wholeheartedly supported by Weymouth Town Council. It was their initial approach to us back in 2017 when we were drafting those orders, which is why we added those provisions on. They are generally supported. However, there is a debate to be had with our colleagues in highways, with our cycling champions, about how we sort of broach the gap between the existing cycling provisions at the prom, at the Esplanade. So happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Councillor Tarr.
I'm Roland Tarr. I represent the area between Dorset and Weymouth, basically, from the north side of the bypass down to Weymouth Borough Council boundary, and from Hardy Monument to Tinkleton. But I also have a very strong interest in cycleways. I probably should declare an interest. I'm the Cycling England Right to Ride representative, have been for about 20 or 30 years, I think. And I am consulted regularly by the cycling officers of the council on cycling matters in other parts of the county as well, very successfully. Now, Weymouth has one of the best cycling systems in the country. It was put in for the the sailing Olympics. It is a superb system. It gets you all around Weymouth virtually. There's a few funny little gaps, but they're really difficult problems. But suddenly you come to the seafront and there's a complete gap. And I had a new hip recently, and I can now walk and cycle. But for several months, I couldn't actually walk or swim in the summer. My friends all went swimming, or my family went swimming down in Overcombe. I used to push off because they were all chatting on the beach and I got fed up with it. I couldn't actually legally I had to go on the road, which is nasty. It's many channels, lots of traffic lights, lots of diesel fumes spraying in your face from the buses and the lorries and the cars that go up and down there. It was really unpleasant to cycle down there. And I tried walking down, I was in extreme pain. So there are lots of people who have a reason to cycle down there. If you're with a family, a young family, out for a cycle ride for the day, cycling around Weymouth, it would be illegal to go down that way. Now, I looked up, over the last few days, I've done a bit of homework on it. I looked up our competitors. Weymouth makes £200 million a year from tourism. It's a very important part of their income. Increasingly, they want, I would imagine, if they've gotten if they're aware of the latest things about climate change, they want to encourage things like walking and cycling. I should also declare this, I write the Coast Path guides for the South West Coast Path. So that's marked on the promenade as being part of the facilities there. But I still support cycling. I think I don't think that John referred to 3 health and well-being implications. Antisocial behaviour orders can have a significant effect on mental health. The orders seek to reduce ASB and a positive contribution to community and individual well-being. I do not think banning cycling is a positive. You'll hear another view in a minute. I do not think cycling is contributing towards community and individual well-being. Climate implications, clearly banning cycling is not good for the climate. It's very bad for the cyclists, extremely bad idea. So I looked up what our competitors do. Bournemouth bans cycling for 2 months of the year, July and August, which means if you go there during the main season, you're not meant to cycle along there. The other thing about Bournemouth is they hire out bicycles and scooters, and if you cycle along the seafront at Bournemouth any time of the year, you are limited to 10 miles an hour by law, because it's bylaw, which I think should be included in our bylaw, 10 mile an hour limit, or even less, but probably 10 is reasonable, because there isn't any limit at the moment. And secondly, those scooters and bikes are not limited to 10 miles an hour, so they're all doing 15 miles an hour and zooming around all the cyclists, and they are actually rented by agreement with the council as part of the project. And Beryl bikes and scooters are coming to Weymouth, I believe, for this summer, is that right? So I think they should be, if it's possible legally, to limit them to 10 miles an hour. There's a little thing you can twiddle on the computer to do that. It should be done. But I do think we should not be banning it. We should be looking at how we can make a way through a continuous cycleway with a speed limit, which would allow people with their families to cycle through there. And I know that Weymouth Borough Council are very much against this, but we're looking at it from a county point of view, from a tourism point of view, from an income. This county must be identified as a good place to come for a good ecological green holiday, if you like.
Yes, I mean, I have to agree. 36% of people had concerns about this, and many felt there needs to be a defined area for cycling. And Dorset Council is quite rightly encouraging cyclists all around the county. So is it not possible to introduce a cycle lane?
Thank you. Anybody else like to? Oh, Councillor Starr. I'll come to this side in a second. Sorry, Anne. Yes, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly confused as to why we don't ban begging, quite rightly, but we ban aggressive begging. But we can't do the same with cycling. Why can we not just target people who are cycling too fast and aggressively to corner face? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fry, or was it Councillor? Beg your pardon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Reinhope Westham, ward down in Weymouth. I'm also on the Town Council. I know strongly supports this bylaw going forward. Now, a bit of history on this. Previously, before this bylaw was written, which I think was, I'm looking at Graham Duggan over here, for about 5 years ago, I came in. Cycling was banned completely from the Esplanade. This bylaw was brought in as a compromise to allow and encourage cycling for families and workers in the town centre to cycle to and from work. Hence, the time was set from 10 till 5:30, the exclusion, because that would allow people that finishing at 5 to walk to where their bike was stored, then come back and cycle along the Esplanade home, and vice versa in the morning. It gave them time to get there, store, to work. The issue is Weymouth seafront in the summer becomes a heavily populated location. And the issue is not with the families and the young children cycling on the prom, hence they are excluded from the bylaw. But the issue is with the people that are training for Tour de France that use the Esplanade. And we have a similar situation on the Rodwell Trail. Now, I'm probably going to guess the amount of fines or exclusions issued in the last 5 years are probably countable on a single hand, if any at all. Because like the begging policy, this is only used as a toolkit where we do have aggressive cyclists or people that are, a danger to people as a way to prevent this. There is also a bus lane right opposite the Esplanade for at least half of the stretch, which cyclists can use, that is not as heavily populated with cars and is safer. So I actually support this bylaw going forward as unamended. The only thing I would like to have seen is to move the 5:30 till 5, just because it coincides with businesses closing. But I think for that additional half hour and the costs occurred on changing a signage, it's probably not worth it.
Thank you very much. I know Jonathan wishes to speak.
Chairman, thank you. This is really for Councillor Tarr, because you declared an interest, but you didn't actually say what the nature of the interest was. And as you spoke, I became a little more concerned, because you spoke about creating there being a missing link, this stretch. And in your declaration of your disclosable pecuniary interests, and these are the interests that would require you to leave the room, you've written that you write guidebooks for the South West Coast Path and the Northumberland Coast Path, so that's neither here nor there, for which you receive royalties and public lending rights. So I think you just need to be clear to the rest of the members what the nature of the interest is, and if it is a pecuniary interest you're declaring, then you will need to leave the chamber.
Can you give me an opinion on that?
So I think obviously it's each individual member's responsibility to declare their own interest and to be satisfied that they can remain in the room. I'm not clear, though, what sort of interest you have declared, whether you're declaring a disclosable pecuniary interest or whether you're declaring something else. So you're not declaring any pecuniary interest this morning.
Okay, you're happy, Jonathan? Thank you. Councillor Fry.
Thank you. I note all the comments that have been made on this and the people cycling on them, and I fully support people cycling for fitness reasons, for environment and climate reasons, for mental health reasons. It's really good to see people cycling. But what we're missing the point here is the danger to people, the people walking on the promenade down there. We can see the impact of a collision on a person, particularly a small child. They're not particularly aware when they're walking on the beach, from the beach to the shops down there. To me, it's a major factor in danger. And I see no reason why along that stint that people cannot cycle on the road. That's what the roads are there for. It's also an offence to cycle on the pavement anywhere in any other town. So why should Weymouth be any different than that? So I know it's a nice level clear path. There's no traffic there. People will speed. There will be antisocial cycling. In fact, there doesn't have to be antisocial cycling to have an accident. It's a recipe for disaster. Wheeled devices moving around with pedestrians. So I support this restriction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrant Ward. The cycling lobby have made a very powerful case. as always, and it's very persuasive, and you put it very well. But my concern is that the cycling lobby always have a very good case and very good lobby. The mums and dads and the children and the holiday makers don't have anything like as powerful a voice. They've just been spoken for by Councillor Fry here. And I am concerned that there's nobody here representing them with quite the same articulate and powerful case that you're putting, which I respect. I have never been hit by a car, but I have actually been hit while standing on the side of the road by a cyclist. And it did me very considerable damage indeed, including breaking my glasses and much bruising. So I do know that actually you can get hit by a cyclist and it can be very serious. And I'm an adult, so it would have been a lot braver if I'd been a child or a mum with children. I'm also terribly aware and have known Weymouth Esplanade since I was a child. And the point about that space is for family activity. It's not about getting from A to B. And councillors will know that this is not the only forum in which I challenge this council's view that all of our roads are about getting traffic from A to B as quickly and safely as possible. Sometimes it's about community life. And I just feel that on balance, the Weymouth Esplanade, for the periods of time that we've set it aside, we should prioritise things other than cycling. And with all due respect, it's a very good case that's been made. So I support this recommendation.
Thank you. John Selgren.
Thank you, Chairman. And members, just might I add a very small piece of information which I think might help you with this part of your discussion. As part of the Council's responsibilities to produce the local transport plan, which is the new one of which has already begun, we have one in place already, but that's due to be refreshed. That work has started, and that does include a detailed study of the Weymouth area. Our members are quite right in saying that this council, indeed its predecessors, have done a lot of work to improve sustainable cycle routes, but also safe routes for pedestrians as well. So I think, if I may, and I'd be more than happy to have further discussion with members who would like to pursue the discussion about this particular matter, but there is work being done, as John indicated, by our colleagues in Highways on improving the sustainable cycle routes and indeed pedestrian routes safely within the Weymouth area as well as across the whole Dorset Council patch. That may be an area where we can take that discussion forward to deal with, in a sense, the facilities for cycling and safe walking, and then you can consider perhaps the matter of the safety, which of course is the subject of this report.
Right, thank you. Councillor Apothecary.
Thank you. Val Apothecary, Gillingham Ward. I am in absolute agreement with my colleague here, Councillor Jesperson. A lot of our income as a council, as a county, comes from holiday makers. Weymouth has always been considered a safe family venue, a safe place to bring your family. And I really think that on the Esplanade there, we should be thinking mostly of pedestrian safety. I'm not anti-cycling in any respect at all, but we all know that specified areas produce the safest results. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tarr, or was it Councillor Starr? Sorry. Tarr.
I would like to say that I think including cycling under the same label as drug dealing, substance misuse, discarded paraphernalia, street drinking, aggressive banking, prostitution, sexually related activity is wrong. And I think we should be looking at it positively and trying to come up with a positive solution rather than just placing a ban.
Do is that we should look to see whether you want to add any amendments or make any suggestions to this point and then vote on just the cycling alone, if that's okay. Councillor Rowe, did you want to ask for some specific work to be done on this to go through as a recommendation to Cabinet?
Yes, please. But I can't agree with this because I don't agree with the aggressive begging PSPO. So I will be voting against this. Yeah, so be it. Yeah.
Sorry, I think what we need to do, because there's been a lot of very good points made on the cycling, is to actually just agree where you want to go just with cycling, and then we'll come back to the overall recommendation on the, is that okay? Does anybody actually want to make any recommendations? Councillor Coombe.
Thank you. I've listened very carefully to what everyone's been saying, and I was just reflecting on the new highway code where car drivers are supposed to give way to more vulnerable road users. Well, to me, cycling on the Esplanade is exactly that. Cyclists should be giving way to more vulnerable users, which are the pedestrians and the families. So I'm in full support and would propose the recommendation as written in the agenda, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pothecary.
That proposal.
Thank you. Then in which case we'll just go through the vote. This is just on the cycling for the moment. Those in favour of passing the recommendation to Cabinet? Against? Okay, that recommendation is carried, but maybe we could still urge that work's done on looking at the cycling provision. Did you want to cover the Trinity Passage Gateway separately? Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Trinity Passage, the church sits on the top, and then we've got the road, and then there's a sort of a small underpass. We get all sorts of problems there. I had a quick look on our database, 59 records in the last 12 months relating to issues down there. So it's all sorts. It's fly tipping, rough sleeping, urination, defecation, drug dealing, alcohol, etc. So the area it is quite a hotspot for problems, and which not only affect the church and people coming and going from the crypt, including Sunday school children, etc., but also those residents in those houses just next to it. So what we're proposing, Chair, is to put the gates back. So there were two gates there, gate either side. They were, we understand, removed as part of the war effort, and weren't replaced. So we haven't quite sorted out how this will be funded just yet, but in principle, it's necessary to use a public space protection order in lieu of the old provisions where we used to be able to put gating orders in for alleyways, etc. So the proposal is to put those two gates back. And we've had quite a lot of responses, the majority of people in support. We've had a couple of local residents who are concerned about access, which we will accommodate. And then obviously the actual structure and the type and the design and the ability to open and close, etc., we'll discuss with the church and local residents just to make sure we get it right. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak on this particular part of this? No? Are we happy that that's great? Okay, then I think we come back to the overall. Oh, sorry, did you wish to speak, Councillor Pothecary? No? No, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, we come back to the overall recommendation on the Weymouth Antisocial Behaviour related PSPO. So I'm just asking whether everybody agrees, as we've discussed all the way through, that this is now going forward for recommendation to Cabinet.
Chair, I would like to propose it goes forward as it is.
Okay, thank you. That's Councillor Fry proposing. Councillor Hope? Thank you. Okay, let's just see. How many for, please? Thank you. And against? Thank you. That's carried through. Okay. Right, we move now to the Dorset Beaches Antisocial Behaviour related PSPO. John.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a brand new provision. So it's off the back of some significant issues that came to light in 2020 in the summer, where travel restrictions across the country were imposed by the government, and we got a huge increase in the number of people coming to Dorset on holiday and using open spaces, in particular our beaches. Now, whilst the council isn't against people coming on holiday to Dorset for obvious reasons, actually this type of behaviour was incredibly problematic for our communities. All sorts of issues: noise, rubbish, fires, antisocial behaviour, parties, I won't go into details, but human waste, etc. And we got a massive increase in the number of complaints. And what we did is we mapped those increased complaints and we monitored it. We didn't bring in a knee-jerk reaction. We looked to see what happened in 2021, and we still got quite a few problems. Not as bad as 2020, but still significant. And so we drafted up this new revised order to cover unauthorised overnight camping on our beaches. Now, we've targeted this to the beaches where we have problems. Now, this has thrown up a bit of an issue because the council, as an authority, didn't have any. I think we have one complaint about Studland, and actually we've received a whole raft of evidence, in particular from National Trust, supporting the addition of Studland, but which we will look at. We will look to introduce. But what we've done, based on the available evidence at the time, is we've targeted those specific areas and we've drafted the order. Now, the feedback that's come back from the consultation is that we didn't quite get it right, and we were in danger of targeting families on the beach during the day with sunshades, etc. So what we've done is we've reworded a significant portion of the order to try and target the specific activity which is causing the most problems, which is groups of people, overnight camping, loud music, rubbish, refusing to follow any sort of rules and refusing to tidy up after themselves. Now, this isn't a prohibition of camping on beaches. This is a power that enables an authorised officer, so a police officer, authorised, fully trained officer, if requested, to pack up and go. If you refuse, then you commit an offence. So it's not a blanket ban on camping on beaches. And then also, if you've had a warning, a previous warning under that provision, then if you refuse to go, then you're committing an offence as well. So we've tried to accommodate our fishing community, which you know, some of our beaches incredibly popular for fishing, particularly overnight. So we're not targeting individual fishing persons who are just seeking shelter from the elements. That's not who we're targeting. What we're targeting is groups of people that cause problems. And so we've updated the order to reflect that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have to say I'm extremely pleased to see this provision, and I very much support it. I have a lot of experience, or a fair bit of experience of wild camping, not very much in the UK, but in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And there's a very ethical approach among genuine wild campers, and they would never, ever leave anything, and I do mean anything, behind. And so the people that this provision is dealing with are not part of the wild camping community. They're not people who are exercising their right to roam. They're not people who are enjoying the open countryside. No genuine wild camper would ever dream of camping on a family beach, because it's not wild. So I think we need to be very clear who we're not interfering with this provision. And I think that it's right that Dorset Council should react to the experience that we had on our beaches in the previous 2 summers. So I very much support this. I do have a question in terms of the wording, and I don't want to be over draconian, but there's an ambiguity in the point 4, the prohibition. It says no groups of more than one. Now, I understand what you mean by that. You meant not the one fisherman but I can foresee that with the very people that you've been talking about. They're one per tent, and they could argue the toss and say, well, we're not a group. I'm just here by myself, and Val is just here by herself, and Tony's just here. And I wondered if that wording was ambiguous and unhelpful, and if we might just look at that again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was. That was in the original order. Yeah, we didn't quite get it right. So what we've done is we've amended the wording to say the prohibition contained within this order does not apply to single individuals who are conducting bona fide fishing activities. So we've updated that. That's in the proposed order.
But does it still say no group of more than one person? No, that's gone.
It's gone, yeah. So in my version, which I'm hoping you've got the same one, it's read and struck through that wording.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, that's good. Thank you. I see no one else wishes to... Oh, do you? Sorry, Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. No, I support this request in here, and we would have all seen the photographs and heard the stories over the last couple of years of people there. What we haven't got in the paperwork is smell-o-vision, and the smell left behind by people with illegal camping, leaving what they do behind. It's not nice, and we have to protect our beaches and our countryside. People going out responsibly camping will leave nothing behind, as Councillor Jesperson says. Those who want to go out and leave waste behind should be with this thing. But I also note in there that actually they get a warning first and asked to leave, and at that point they get them fall foul of this order. So there is a degree of protection for everybody in there, including the council. And I would actually like to propose this. We adopt this for the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody in favour of this one going through to recommendation? Thank you. We then move on to the Dorset Open Land Antisocial Behaviour Related PSPO. This really is through the arising of the starting of fires. John.
Thank you, Chairman. It's actually myself up at this. It's fine. It's Graham Duggan, Head of Community and Public Protection. This provision is proposed today because on the back of the disastrous Wareham fire in 2021 and a subsequent report to Cabinet outlined what measures Dorset Council could take to assist other agencies in reducing the risk as low as possible for such an event to happen again. And Cabinet asked that we explore the use of a public spaces protection order for the lighting of open fires on land such as Wareham Forest. We've looked nationally at the use of PSPOs for this purpose, and it is rare, but there are a small number of councils who have introduced such a provision, and that they seem to be working successfully in raising public awareness. This really isn't about stopping people from lighting fires. It's about raising the awareness in the first instance, so that within the community, it's well known by the community, plus the fire service, police, rangers, that the lighting of fires in these areas is exceptionally problematic. We have proposed land in the order, which is currently under the management of Forestry England, and a couple of questions have been asked about other areas in the Dorset Council area. And I understand that, particularly the Urban Heaths Partnership have made representation to say we have similar land and we have similar issues. We've heard that representation, and the reply that we've given to the Urban Heaths Partnership is that we will look at other areas of land. We do need to satisfy those legal criteria that were talked about a little bit earlier about there being a need for a PSPO. But in this instance, I think anything that the council can do to reduce the risk of further fires in areas such as this has to be welcomed. We're working closely with Forestry England to see whether their rangers can be authorised to enforce the provisions. We're talking about really big areas of land, and we're also working with them to look at the effective signposting at public car parks and pull-ins to these areas, so that people who don't live in Dorset, as soon as they arrive at these locations, will be aware of the provision. And just finally to say, Chair, that the measure's fully supported by Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you very much. I hope also that we are working with the Forestry Commission and other agencies to perhaps look at areas where safe barbecuing can take place. I think that has to go hand in hand. Does anybody? Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Chairman. Tony Coombs forward. I was very interested to hear what you said, that the current proposals are for just Forestry Commission land. And as I've already said, I'm hoping that my area will be looked at for future orders. But I'll give you an example. We have Dewlands Common, which is protected heathland as a two-part north and south, isolated within an urban area, which is subject to arson on a regular basis. Are our countryside team, who manage areas like that, going to be empowered to enforce this legislation as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, when we look at these additional areas which are covered by council officers in terms of management duties, we will have discussions with the relevant services to look at the role of those officers. We have to be careful that we are giving enforcement responsibilities to officers who are happy with that being part of their role. Because it is a distinct change of shift, distinct change of emphasis for some officers. But as John said earlier, if the decision is taken to authorise council officers, we will ensure that is done with their agreement, and that is done with full training and the tools that they need to enforce the provisions, particularly in areas where they may be in an enforcement situation when there's nobody else around them, there's nobody else to call on quickly. So we are talking very closely with Dorset Police about the support that they can give to, for example, Forestry England Rangers, if they're authorised to enforce these provisions. So I think it will be by negotiation, but certainly the intent would be to have council officers authorised when we're looking at council-owned areas of land or areas of land that we have right of access to.
Does anybody wish? Councillor Fry.
I just propose it as it is, that we pass it up to Cabinet, please, the recommendation as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Thank you. Everybody in favour of this? Thank you very much. I think then we've covered item 6. Fabulous. Okay, we just then move on to urgent items. You'll be jolly pleased to hear there are none. Councillor Fry, what have you forgotten?
I've forgotten nothing.
What?
We've heard some really good work today, and the issue of some of the evidence that's gone back that we've seen is there. What I wonder about is how we go forward from this to prove the value of these powers. If this order works, there will be no evidence. So when we come to review it again, there will be no evidence to review, and I'm wondering whether we can capture some of the warnings, some of the information, some of the action, so that when it does come up again, we've got that in front of us, and that'll also help future challenges that may come in or future areas, please. Thank you.
Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a really valid point. John and I often talk about this, that if the orders work well, we'll have no evidence of it, or there'll be no incidents. With the dog-related public space protection orders, Scrutiny Committee are receiving a report tomorrow, a post-implementation report about how effective the order's been, or issues that we've come up against in the first year of implementation, and there have been some issues. So your committee might want to think about a recommendation that Scrutiny Committee take a look at this after the first year to see how the implementation has gone, to see what information is coming out. It might be a useful opportunity to look at the cycling and what progress is being made there in relation to work with highways. So that's something that could possibly be offered.
Is that?
I'm happy to propose that. I'd also like some feedback on, I know that one of the points of my colleagues is about the aggressive begging, and I'd like that particularly some feedback that we can get back here on that. But I would also like that as a recommendation to scrutiny, please, that they consider and look into these facts, particularly taking up on these points on here, so that we can all go forward and learn as we go. But thank you for that.
John?
Thank you, Chair. We do keep stats. I've got the world's most complicated spreadsheet in front of me. So just looking at begging. So last year, 21 interventions, shall we say, by our community safety team. I've got them all broken down by district, by area, verbal warnings, CSS interventions, etc. So we keep those on a monthly basis. I'm happy to prepare a summary report for committee.
Very much. I think Councillor Fry wants to come back, but before I do, I'd like to award John a Blue Peter badge for this report and all the work he's done, because he really deserves it. This has been immense, and he's going to need a holiday next. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I just want to reassure Councillor Rowe, from my experience, that nobody wants to prosecute somebody unless there's due course or due reason. Aggressive begging can be horrible in the wrong situation for the wrong person. Everybody takes it, it's subjective whether it's antisocial or not, and education is always the way forward first, trying to prevent or deter that with engagement, and any enforcement will be the last action at all. So I think you can be reassured that nobody who shouldn't be prosecuted will be prosecuted.
On to this now. Is it really going to be very quick, Councillor Tom?
I know how difficult it is to come to conclusions on this. I've been dealing with it as a member of Dorset, as a worker in Dorset Council, and also now as a councillor. And thank you very much for all your work. And it's very skillfully chaired meeting, ending in an hour and 10 minutes. That's excellent.
Yeah, but anyway, item 10, urgent items, there are none. Item 11, exempt business, there is none. I therefore close the meeting and thank you.